This is KNWA News at 10.
Did you kill Isaiah?
No, I didn't.
You just heard Mauricio Torres say he did not kill his son Isaiah when I point blank asked him if he did. Thank you for joining us tonight at 10. I'm Chelsea Helms. It's looking like a clean sweep for our incumbents in Congress. Let's go ahead and take a quick look at who will be representing Arkansas and Washington. We're breaking into your regular programming with an important news update. The Benton County Sheriff's Office right now live with an update on the investigation into the missing pregnant woman. We learned that not only was she found dead, but her baby was also found dead. And in fact, they were found dead in separate locations. Mayor, just 4 years ago, you were telling me that we wouldn't be able to be sitting where we are because it would have been underwater from that historic flooding. I have to mention, I'm in this outfit right here. It's not my typical getup that you see me in on the evening news. This is the official pink heels uniform that I'm wearing. Take a look at the back of it. Breaking news tonight as we come on the air. Former President Donald Trump says he has been indicted again. Governor Sanders says only 35% of Arkansas third graders can read at a grade level. If that statistic is similar next year, would that mean that 65% of third graders are held back? I'm pretty sure that when this wind stops blowing, by the way, that my hair's just going to still be straight out behind me. Hopefully, surgeries like this, if it continues to be successful, can be done all around the country and maybe even the world. Give that power back to the person.
Right. It diffuses so much.
Yeah. Well, tell us, what are some local resources that are available to the people here in Little Rock and the greater central Arkansas region who may be enduring domestic violence? We want to give you a little bit of a detailed look into a tool that you can use to kind of know what's going on around you in terms of the road conditions.
Chelsea Helms is live at the Mauricio Torres sentencing hearing in Bentonville for us tonight, where jurors are a step closer to choosing his fate. Chelsea.
Yeah, Chad, they certainly are a step closer to deciding whether he will face the death penalty. Today, jurors heard from both the prosecution and defense, yet again, in the case against Mauricio Torres. The prosecution's asking jurors to consider sentencing him to death because they say he deserves to die for the crimes he committed against Isaiah. His defense team is saying that it's instances from his childhood that contributed to his actions. Now, you might remember that yesterday, jurors deliberated for about 4 hours before they found Torres guilty of capital murder as well as battery in the first degree. The death penalty possibility stems from his capital murder conviction. In order for that death sentence to be delivered, the state must meet 3 different thresholds. First, the prosecution must prove at least one aggravating circumstance, which must be unanimously agreed on by the jury. The second, the aggravating circumstance must outweigh mitigating circumstances. And finally, those aggravating circumstances must justify a sentence of death beyond a reasonable doubt. Today, the jury reconvened and heard from several witnesses on both sides. 2 of Torres's adult children took the stand for the prosecution, as well as one of his wife's adult children. All of them detailed chronic physical and sexual abuse they endured, they say, at the hands of Torres. While Torres wasn't convicted of these prior violent crimes, prosecuting attorney Nathan Smith called them the aggravating circumstances. When it was the defense's turn to call witnesses, his attorney focused on Torres's childhood trauma. His father testified that he forced Torres to do exercise punishments, much like Torres admitted to doing to Isaiah. The defense also made it a point to say that he'd never met his mother. A board-certified forensic psychologist also took the stand. He examined Torres and said the main takeaway from that examination was that he meets the criteria for PTSD, but he did say it's a psychological condition that can easily be faked. Chad, completely worth noting tonight is that when the judge dismissed the jury, he made sure to say, do not discuss this case or sentencing until you are back in this courtroom come Tuesday. That is when the court is going to be reconvened, and they'll hear from prosecutors as well as defense attorneys, likely for a final time before they ultimately decide Torres's fate. Live in Benton County, Chelsea Helms, KNWA, Northwest Arkansas News. The only known slave to make it to freedom, only to be extradited back to the United States, is from right here in Northwest Arkansas. Nelson Hackett lived in Fayetteville before he made his trek across the northern border into Canada. Historians with the University of Arkansas say it's his escape, then recapture, that put into motion the events that ended slavery.
Nelson Hackett really exemplifies the American story of pursuit of freedom and love of family.
It's an American story written in part in Fayetteville.
It's a really global story that puts Northwest Arkansas on the map.
Once enslaved in the northwest corner of Arkansas, Nelson Hackett made his escape to freedom in the summer of 1841.
So Nelson Hackett left Fayetteville. He crossed the Mississippi River up in Marion City, Missouri, and Quincy, Illinois.
Hackett made it all the way to Chatham, about 50 miles east of Detroit in what's now Ontario, Canada.
The miles and miles of slave territory that Nelson Hackett crossed, crossing a whole national border into Canada, was that sheer will and desire.
University of Arkansas historians Drs. Carrie Banton and Michael Pierce have researched Hackett's every known move.
This is a deed book for Washington County, and Washington County has one of the oldest collection of deeds west of the Mississippi. Leaving Fayetteville, he took a hat, a coat, a gold watch, a chain, a horse.
These items would end up costing him his freedom. They belonged to Alfred Wallace, who owned Hackett, according to this bill of sale in the Washington County Archives. When Wallace learned of Hackett's whereabouts, he had him arrested and demanded he be sent back to the U.S., but the Canadians refused without extradition papers from Arkansas.
His fate was debated in the British Parliament and the Canadian Colonial Assembly.
Back in Washington County, a grand jury publicly indicted Hackett on theft charges.
Alfred Wallace's old friend, Archibald Yale, is governor of Arkansas at the time, and makes a formal request to the Canadian authorities for extradition.
The Canadian government obliged.
He was the only enslaved person from the U.S. that the British authorities in Canada sent back to slavery.
Back in the hands of his slave owners, Hackett was publicly whipped hundreds of times. Drs. Banton and Pierce say it was a way to send this message to fellow slaves.
If you escape,
this is what will happen to you.
We will go up to Canada and we will go 1,000 miles and we will spend an immense amount of money and we will get you back here.
Hackett was then sold to a slave dealer in what was known as the Republic of Texas to be worked to death. But it's rumored he once again broke free.
When you're a historian, especially working in the 19th century or even earlier, you have to live with fair degrees of uncertainty.
Hackett's story goes far beyond one man's fight for freedom.
What Nelson Hackett does in 1841 is put into motion the events that allow Black people to escape.
And it's the escape of the enslaved, the historians say, that put into motion the sectional crisis that contributed to the start of the Civil War and ultimately the abolition of slavery.
It was Black people who voted with their feet. They took freedom into their own hands, and it forced other people to take actions, to either pass laws or to get on board.
Hackett unknowingly risked his life to save thousands of others.
Through his actions, he put into motion the events that led to Canada saying never again. No more Black people, no more enslaved people will be returned to bondage.
Nelson Hackett's name is one that will live on here in Fayetteville. Recently, city council members voted to change the name of this street from Archibald Yale Boulevard to Nelson Hackett Boulevard. Here in the downtown square is where Hackett's slave owner is said to have owned a store where he likely worked. A plaque detailing his story is set to go up here in the flower bed in front of the Bank of Fayetteville.
And it will get to take up space in a place that was once slavery, where Hackett, name and body, was once enslaved. He can now be seen and read in this liberated light.
Memorializing a man whose pursuit of freedom prompted a much bigger movement.
We can look at someone like Nelson Hackett and say, if he can do that and travel all those hundreds of miles just to breathe free air, we can accomplish our wildest dreams.
Doctors Pierce and Banton have documented Hackett's life and journey with fellow U of A colleagues as part of the Nelson Hackett Project. I encourage you, go check it out. We have a link for you right now on KNWA.com.